The day my wife said she had outgrown me and handed me divorce papers to sign was the same morning I approved her dream promotion as the hidden billionaire who owned the $10 billion empire she bragged about working for, and while she believed she was stepping into a bigger future without me, she had no idea that by the end of that day she would realize the man she tried to leave behind was the one who controlled the very world she was celebrating. She stood in the living room holding a thin stack of papers like they were nothing more than a final receipt, and the sunlight pouring through the tall windows behind her made her look victorious. Her promotion had been announced the previous evening. Vice President of Strategic Development, youngest in company history, fastest rise in the division. Her phone had not stopped ringing. Congratulatory messages. Executive emails. LinkedIn posts. Corporate spotlight features. She was glowing with validation and she believed she had outgrown me. I sat on the edge of the couch staring at the bold title across the first page resting on the wooden coffee table. Divorce agreement. The ink looked darker than it should have. Heavy, intentional, permanent. She placed the pen in my direction gently, not aggressively, not emotionally, just confidently. Her posture carried something new. Elevation. Not joy, not anger. Elevation. She began explaining her decision in calm, measured sentences about growth and alignment and how sometimes two people move in different directions and how she could not carry someone who had stopped striving. Stopped striving. That phrase landed quietly. Because 7 hours earlier I had finalized acquisition of a European logistics corridor that would make our company the most dominant infrastructure network in 3 continents. 7 hours earlier I had signed documents that positioned our firm as untouchable in global trade. 7 hours earlier I had become officially and legally the sole controlling shareholder of the $10 billion corporation she worked for. She did not know. No one inside her division knew. The deal had been structured through layered holding entities. Private capital pools. Silent mergers. Proxy negotiations. The announcement was scheduled for next week. Her promotion had been approved based on projections tied to a growth strategy one personally architected. She was celebrating success built on decisions she believed came from somewhere else. She looked at me with softened superiority and spoke about stability and ambition and how she deserved someone who matched her trajectory. The sunlight hit the divorce papers again, and for a moment I considered telling her everything. But revelation without timing weakens impact. And impact requires structure. I listened without interrupting. She spoke about how she had carried financial weight. How she felt embarrassed explaining my undefined work to colleagues. How she could not continue pretending we were equals in ambition. Equals. That word echoed differently. Because ambition is not always loud and silence is not always stagnation. She moved closer and placed the pen into my hand with gentle insistence. Not cruel, not dramatic. Certain. I studied her face carefully. There was no hatred. There was calculation. She believed she was stepping forward, she believed she was shedding weight, she believed she was evolving, and in her mind I was proof of something she had surpassed. I asked one simple question calmly. Are you sure this is about ambition? She hesitated briefly but recovered quickly. It's about growth. Growth. The word felt almost ironic. Because growth was exactly what I had been executing at scale she could not yet comprehend. She turned slightly toward the window and spoke about executive dinners and long-term vision and the circles she now belonged to. Circles. I almost smiled at that. Because I owned the largest circle in that ecosystem. She continued describing how she needed someone visible, someone strategic, someone powerful. Someone powerful. The irony sat heavy but quiet. Power rarely announces itself. It prepares. I looked down at the divorce agreement again. The clauses were structured aggressively. Asset division. Spousal separation terms. Future claim limitations. Her legal team had worked carefully. She had prepared. Preparation deserves respect. Even if misdirected. I set the pen back on the table slowly. Not refusing, not agreeing, just pausing. Her expression shifted slightly, sensing that pause. There was a moment of subtle irritation. Not at me. At hesitation. She had rehearsed this. She expected quick compliance. She expected quiet acceptance. She expected gratitude for clarity. Instead, she received composure. She reminded me softly that she had already spoken to her parents. That they supported her decision. That they believed this was necessary. Support always feels stronger when validation is shared. I nodded slowly, absorbing everything without reaction. Because reaction would give her confirmation. And confirmation was not yet due. She walked toward the hallway to retrieve her phone, likely expecting another congratulatory message. I remained seated in stillness. 7 hours earlier I had signed a document transferring majority control of the corporation she celebrated. 7 hours earlier board members had addressed me as chairman. 7 hours earlier analysts began preparing press releases. And here I was holding divorce papers. The timing was almost poetic. But poetry means nothing without patience. She returned and placed the phone down gently. Her tone softened slightly. This doesn't have to be ugly. Ugly. That word carried more meaning than she realized. Because ugliness comes from exposure. And exposure was coming. Just not today. I stood slowly and walked toward the large window overlooking the skyline. The same skyline where my company owned distribution hubs in 12 key districts. She mistook my silence for defeat. I could feel it. Her shoulders relaxed. Her breathing steadied. She believed she had made the correct move. I turned back toward her calmly. When is the official announcement for your promotion celebration? She smiled slightly. Next Friday at the executive banquet hall. Senior leadership will be there. Senior leadership. I almost admired the alignment. Because next Friday was also the global announcement of the acquisition. Her celebration. My revelation. Same stage. Different understanding. She picked up the pen again and extended it once more. Let's not drag this out. Drag. Time was not dragging. It was positioning. I took the papers gently and flipped through them slowly. Each page represented a belief. Each clause represented assumption. She watched my face, searching for emotion. But discipline is learned over years. And composure is weaponized through preparation. I signed the final page quietly. Not because I agreed with her perception. But because I understood something deeper. Timing was more powerful than argument. She looked almost relieved. Not cruel. Relieved. She believed she was stepping into a larger world. And in a way she was. She just did not know who built it. As she collected the signed documents carefully, I asked one final calm question. Will you be inviting me to the celebration? She paused, surprised. Why would you want to come? Because I'm proud of you. That sentence unsettled her slightly. Not because it was sarcastic. Because it was sincere. She nodded slowly. If you want to attend, you can. Good. I said softly. I wouldn't miss it. And that is where the real story begins. The week between signing those divorce papers and her promotion celebration moved with a strange kind of stillness, as if the universe itself understood that two timelines were converging quietly toward the same stage, and neither of us yet realized how violently perception would collide with reality. She moved through the house differently. Lighter. Focused. Almost detached. Her phone calls were sharper now. Her tone carried authority. Her schedule expanded. She was rehearsing for elevation. Meanwhile, I was coordinating something far larger. Board confirmations. Global press timing. Regulatory filings. Confidential executive briefings. The acquisition announcement had to be flawless. No leaks. No premature whispers. No internal panic. The company she believed merely employed her was about to learn it had new ownership. And that ownership slept beside her for years. Her family visited 3 days after the papers were signed. They entered with the quiet energy of people who believe they are witnessing necessary correction. Her mother hugged her with pride. Her father shook my hand politely but without warmth. Her brother studied me with contained satisfaction. They spoke openly about how proud they were of her progress. How she had always been ambitious. How she deserved someone who matched her corporate velocity. Velocity. That word again. I remained composed. Listening. Observing. Understanding that pride rarely recognizes its own blind spots. Her father mentioned how executive circles operate differently. How power moves quickly at that level. How men without structure fall behind. Fall behind. The irony was almost overwhelming. But irony must be preserved until it can be revealed properly. I thanked them for their concern calmly. Not defensive. Not sarcastic. Measured. Her brother leaned back in his chair and mentioned casually that the company she worked for was rumored to be positioning itself for global expansion. He said it with admiration. He had no idea. The paperwork approving that expansion sat in a secured digital vault under my authorization. He spoke about how senior leadership would need sharp strategic minds to navigate that shift. He complimented her promotion repeatedly. And each compliment rested on a foundation I had laid quietly. They left satisfied. Believing they had witnessed transition. Believing they had supported advancement. Believing they had seen clarity. When the door closed, she exhaled softly. I know this isn't easy, she said. I nodded gently. Growth rarely is. She mistook the depth of that sentence. The next few days she spent preparing for the celebration. Selecting a dress. Coordinating seating arrangements. Reviewing her speech. Her speech was focused on vision. On driving the company forward. On strategic alignment. On building legacy. Legacy. She practiced those words in front of the mirror, unaware that the legal authority over that legacy now bore my signature. Meanwhile, inside the executive tower downtown, a different preparation unfolded. Board members received final briefings. Legal teams confirmed compliance. Media partners scheduled synchronized release windows. The announcement deck contained my name in bold. Chairman and controlling shareholder. Effective immediately. The timing was deliberate. The global release would go live 30 minutes into the banquet. Just after her promotion speech. Just before the CEO introduced future strategic leadership direction. Precision matters. Because revelation without structure feels chaotic. And chaos weakens impact. Thursday night before the celebration, she approached me in the kitchen while reviewing her speech once more. There was a softness in her expression. Not regret. Not doubt. But reflection. She asked whether I truly planned to attend. Yes. She studied my face carefully. You're not angry. No. You're not hurt. I chose honesty without exposure. I understand timing. She paused slightly. That sentence unsettled her for reasons she could not articulate. The morning of the banquet she left early for rehearsals. I remained home finalizing last-minute executive confirmations. The legal announcement system was locked. Press embargo timers were set. International partners stood by. My personal security detail confirmed arrival protocol. No theatrics. Just structure. When I entered the banquet hall that evening, the room was already alive with polished conversations and controlled ambition. Crystal lights reflected across dark suits and silk dresses. Executives clustered in calculated circles. Whispers of strategy floated above champagne glasses. She stood near the front, radiant, confident, poised. Her dress deep emerald. Her posture elevated. Her smile sharpened by achievement. When she noticed me walking in alone without entourage, without spectacle, she seemed momentarily surprised. Not displeased. Just curious. I moved quietly toward a side table, taking a seat among mid-level managers who barely recognized me. That anonymity was familiar. Comfortable. The program began with customary introductions. Regional achievements. Quarterly growth metrics. Future projections. Then her name was announced. Vice President of Strategic Development. Applause erupted. Sustained. Genuine. She walked onto the stage with steady grace. She spoke clearly about resilience, about growth, about the importance of forward-thinking leadership. She referenced how the company was entering a new era of dominance. She referenced strategic partnerships being finalized. She referenced expansion corridors across Europe. Every word connected unknowingly to documents bearing my authority. Her speech concluded with confident assurance that the company's future had never looked brighter. The applause intensified. She smiled, radiant, victorious. Then the CEO returned to the podium. There was a subtle shift in his tone. Not dramatic. Just deliberate. He spoke about transformational leadership. About bold acquisitions. About strategic vision executed in silence. He paused intentionally. The global press embargo timer reached 0. Across the world, financial news alerts activated. Breaking news. $10 billion logistics giant announces new controlling shareholder. Screens across the banquet hall flickered as live news feeds interrupted regular programming. My name filled the digital banners behind the stage. Chairman. Controlling shareholder. Effective immediately. The room shifted instantly. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Champagne glasses halted mid-air. Her expression changed slowly. Confusion first. Then recognition. Then disbelief. The CEO extended his arm toward the audience, inviting the new chairman to join him on stage. Silence thickened. I stood slowly from my seat. No rush. No smile. Just calm. Each step toward the stage felt measured. Not theatrical. Measured. Executives parted instinctively. Eyes wide. Whispers spreading rapidly. Her parents stood near the back of the hall, frozen. Her brother stared at the screen as if hoping it would correct itself. It did not. I stepped onto the stage beside the CEO. He handed me the microphone respectfully. The room remained suspended. I looked out across hundreds of faces. Then my eyes settled on hers. Her promotion speech still echoing in the air. Her divorce papers signed days earlier. Her perception solidified. Now fractured. I spoke calmly. Vision does not always announce itself. Growth is not always visible. And power rarely introduces itself before it is ready. Silence carries structure when paired with discipline. Tonight marks the beginning of a new era for this company. An era built not on noise, but on preparation. I did not mention divorce. I did not mention pride. I did not mention misunderstanding. Because exposure without dignity weakens authority. When I finished speaking, applause returned cautiously, then gradually strengthened. Not because of theatrics. Because of magnitude. I stepped back from the microphone and allowed the CEO to resume control. Her eyes never left mine. The room had shifted permanently. Perception had inverted. The psychological tension had begun. And this was only the beginning. The applause inside the banquet hall did not fade quickly, but it changed tone as realization spread across the room like a slow-moving current, and what had begun as celebration of her promotion transformed into something heavier, something layered, something far more complex than ambition. She remained on stage for several seconds longer than necessary, her smile suspended in place but no longer connected to certainty. It was not humiliation yet. It was recalibration. Her eyes followed me as I stepped down from the stage and resumed a position near the executive row, this time not as a silent guest but as the newly announced authority. Board members shifted posture subtly. Senior executives approached carefully. Hands extended. Congratulations offered. Strategic acknowledgments exchanged. Each gesture carried weight. But my attention remained steady. Not on the executives. On her. Because power in a boardroom is transactional. Power in a marriage is psychological. When the formal program concluded, the room dissolved into clusters of stunned conversation. Financial reporters began requesting statements. Security tightened perimeter quietly. Phones buzzed continuously. She descended from the stage slowly, her expression no longer victorious but searching. Her parents approached her immediately. Questions filled their faces. Her brother stood rigid, staring at me from across the hall. I did not approach her. Not yet. Timing again. She needed space to process the inversion. To move from assumption to awareness. To understand that her promotion had been approved under my governance. That her future trajectory now technically reported upward through my structure. That the man she believed stagnant now owned the architecture of her success. Her father eventually walked toward me with measured steps, his pride visibly unsettled but still attempting composure. He extended his hand again. This time firmly. I underestimated you. His voice carried neither hostility nor apology yet. Only acknowledgement. I accepted the handshake calmly. Perception moves faster than preparation. He nodded slowly, understanding the layered meaning. Her brother approached next, not defensive now but conflicted. He attempted humor lightly, saying, I guess congratulations are in order. I responded evenly. Growth benefits everyone when aligned properly. The sentence carried dual weight. Her mother remained beside her daughter, whispering quietly, clearly attempting to stabilize emotion. Finally she approached. Not angry. Not crying. Just deeply disoriented. She stopped a few feet away from me as executives continued circulating around us. Her voice lowered. Why did you not tell me? There it was. Not accusation. Not bitterness. Confusion. I answered calmly. Because revelation without readiness creates chaos. Her eyes searched my face. You signed the papers. Yes. You let me think. Yes. She inhaled slowly, absorbing the gravity of her own timing. Her promotion speech replayed in her mind. Her references to ambition. To growth. To moving beyond. And now she stood in a room where I held structural authority over the very company she celebrated. The irony did not require commentary. She asked quietly. Is this revenge? No. That word landed firmly. This is alignment. She struggled to process. Alignment. You let me walk into this room believing you were behind me. I was. The sentence carried no sarcasm. Only truth. She closed her eyes briefly, realizing that the architecture of her advancement had been supported quietly from a position she misjudged. Her father stepped closer, attempting to interject but paused, sensing that this exchange required privacy. I gestured subtly toward a private executive lounge behind the main hall. She followed without resistance. Inside the lounge, the noise from the banquet hall dimmed. Soft lighting. Leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking city lights. She stood near the window, breathing slowly, attempting to recalibrate identity. You let me end our marriage without correcting me. Yes. Her voice sharpened slightly. Why? Because understanding forced by explanation does not last. Understanding revealed by experience does. She turned toward me fully now. You think this is a lesson? I shook my head gently. No. It is a mirror. Silence filled the room. Her shoulders lowered gradually. She was intelligent. Ambitious. Strategic. But in that moment she confronted something deeper. The realization that ambition had blinded empathy. That pride had masked insecurity. That assumption had replaced curiosity. She walked slowly toward one of the chairs and sat down carefully. You own the company. You approved my promotion. Yes. You watched me prepare divorce papers. Yes. Her voice softened. Why did you not stop me? Because you were certain. And certainty must meet truth directly. She covered her face briefly, not in shame but in overwhelm. The psychological shift was profound. Her success was real. But the hierarchy had inverted. She had positioned herself above someone who held structural authority. She whispered quietly. I thought you had stopped striving. I have never stopped preparing. That sentence settled heavily. Preparation is silent. Striving is visible. She had measured visibility. I had prioritized structure. She looked up slowly. Do you still want this divorce? The question was no longer confident. It was vulnerable. I answered without haste. Do you? Her eyes filled not with tears but with awareness. No. The word came softly but clearly. The tension in the room shifted. Not resolved. But transformed. Outside the lounge, executives speculated about our conversation. Media alerts continued flooding devices. But inside the quiet space something more significant unfolded. Identity realignment. She stood again and approached me slowly. I believed growth meant distancing from what felt smaller. I did not realize growth sometimes means looking deeper. Her honesty mattered. Because pride admitted becomes humility. And humility strengthens foundation. I did not gloat. I did not expose. Because dominance expressed emotionally weakened strategic authority. Instead I spoke calmly. Marriage is not a promotion ladder. It is partnership. If you measure it competitively you will always misjudge. She nodded, absorbing every word. Her promotion tonight was earned. But her perception had been incomplete. An incomplete perception can fracture stability. After several minutes she asked something that revealed her deepest concern. How will this look? Not the marriage. The company. There it was. Her executive mind still calculating optics. I responded calmly. Leadership respects discipline. Not drama. I will not discuss personal matters publicly. She exhaled, visibly relieved. That decision protected her credibility. Not because I owed her. Because protecting structure benefits both of us. We returned to the banquet hall together, not holding hands, not displaying reconciliation, but walking side by side with quiet awareness. The room watched carefully. Board members observed posture. Executives noted proximity. Media lenses searched for cues. What they saw was composure. Not conflict. Not spectacle. Composure. The psychological shift had occurred privately. And privacy preserved dignity. Her parents watched cautiously. Her brother looked unsettled. But none of them dared comment. Because scale commands silence. The evening concluded with formal introductions of the new ownership structure. I stood beside the CEO. She stood among executive leadership. No tension visible. Only recalibrated alignment. But this was far from over. Because private realization does not automatically repair public assumption. And the divorce papers still bore our signatures. The ride home was quieter than any silence we had shared before, and it was not the silence of resentment or distance but the silence of recalibration, as if both of us understood that something far greater than a promotion or an acquisition had just shifted beneath our marriage. City lights blurred past the windows of the car, reflecting against the glass in soft streaks, and for the first time since she handed me those divorce papers her posture no longer carried elevation. It carried awareness. She removed her heels slowly once we entered the house, placing them carefully by the door as if precision mattered again. The emerald dress that had radiated triumph only hours earlier now looked different, not diminished but humbled by context. She walked into the living room where the coffee table still held the indentation from where the divorce papers had rested days before. She stopped there. Not dramatically. Just still. The house felt heavier now because the narrative had flipped. And flipped narratives demand decisions. Her parents arrived 30 minutes later unannounced. Not confrontational. Concerned. Her father stepped inside with controlled tension, his pride visibly bruised but not broken. Her mother followed quietly, watching her daughter carefully. Her brother remained near the doorway, arms folded, unsure whether to speak. No one mentioned the banquet directly at first. Because no one yet understood how to address the inversion. Her father eventually cleared his throat and spoke carefully. We need to understand what this means. Not for the company. For you too. That question carried more weight than he realized. She looked toward me briefly before answering. It means I misjudged. The admission hung in the air. Her father shifted slightly, taken aback by her directness. You did not know. I did not ask. Her correction was deliberate. She was not excusing herself. She was acknowledging assumption. Her brother finally spoke. You could have told us. I responded calmly. Information delivered before readiness often gets dismissed. Her father studied my expression longer, this time searching for arrogance and finding none. He nodded slowly. You let her go through with the divorce. Yes. You signed. Yes. Why? Because certainty reveals itself when challenged by truth. The room fell quiet again. The psychology of the situation weighed heavily on them. They had supported her decision. Encouraged her belief that she was stepping forward. Now forward had inverted. Her mother approached her daughter gently and asked the question no one else had yet voiced. Do you still want this divorce? She shook her head slowly. No. The word came steadier than before. Her father looked at me. And you? Marriage is not about hierarchy. It is about alignment. If alignment can be rebuilt, then structure remains. He absorbed that answer carefully. Because it was not triumphant. It was measured. Her brother lowered his arms finally. So what happens now? The question was practical. I walked toward the coffee table and retrieved the signed divorce documents from the folder she had placed in the drawer earlier. I laid them flat across the wood surface. Paper that once symbolized separation now represented examination. These are only legal instruments, I said calmly. They hold weight only if we give them execution. She stepped closer and looked at the signatures. Her own handwriting now felt premature. Impulsive. She reached for the pen again, not to hand it to me but to cross through the final authorization page. She did not rip the papers. She did not dramatize. She simply voided them methodically. Because drama satisfies ego. Correction builds discipline. Her father watched the action closely. Her mother exhaled softly in relief. Her brother nodded once slowly. The symbolic weight of that act settled into the room. But reconciliation does not occur in one gesture. It requires confrontation of deeper fracture. After her family left, the house returned to quiet. She sat across from me at the same coffee table where everything began. Her voice carried vulnerability, not weakness. I believed ambition meant moving ahead of you. I did not realize you were building something I could not see. I answered gently. Ambition without transparency breeds misunderstanding. Silence without explanation invites assumption. She nodded, absorbing both truths. I felt embarrassed, she admitted. Not because you are successful. Because I measured you incorrectly. Measurement is dangerous when based on visibility. She leaned forward. Why did you not defend yourself? Because defending ego rarely produces understanding. She studied that carefully. In her world, corporate environments reward loud assertion. In mine, preparation outweighed projection. We were raised differently in ambition. But that difference had not been examined until now. The next morning the media cycle intensified. Business networks replayed footage from the banquet. Her promotion speech juxtaposed with my announcement. Analysts speculated about corporate nepotism. Rival firms suggested conflict of interest. The board issued a statement clarifying governance separation between executive leadership and ownership oversight. Structure protected perception. I ensured her authority remained intact publicly. No suggestion of favoritism. No implication of dependency. Because true power does not diminish those closest to it. It protects their credibility. That decision mattered more to her than the acquisition itself. When she saw the official memo reinforcing her independence, she looked at me differently. Not impressed. Grateful. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did. Why? Because leadership protects structure. Not ego. That was the moment she understood fully. I had never been behind her. I had been building beneath her. Foundation unseen until needed. Her parents invited us for dinner 2 nights later. The atmosphere was cautious but respectful. Her father addressed me differently now. Not with intimidation. With consideration. He admitted openly that he had mistaken visibility for value. That he had measured ambition through external projection. I listened without correcting him. Because humility spoken willingly is stronger than humility forced. Her brother apologized plainly. I thought you were comfortable being average. I responded evenly. Average is rarely silent. Preparation is. He nodded, absorbing the distinction. Dinner ended not in celebration but in recalibrated respect. The psychological hierarchy had dissolved. No dominance. No superiority. Just alignment. At home that night she approached me quietly. I do not want to compete with you. Good. Because partnership is not competition. She smiled faintly. Then teach me how you think. That request carried sincerity. Not opportunism. So we began sharing deeper strategy discussions. Not about corporate secrets. About mindset. Risk evaluation. Timing assessment. Emotional regulation. She realized that ambition expressed loudly can win applause. But ambition executed silently can reshape markets. And that difference changed her perception of strength. Weeks passed. The divorce papers remained voided. Her promotion solidified. The company integrated smoothly under new ownership. And inside our marriage something matured. Not romantic passion. Respect. Respect built not from dominance. But from revelation. Yet tension still lingered. Because exposure leaves imprint. Trust broken by assumption does not heal instantly. It rebuilds slowly. One evening as we sat reviewing company growth projections, she paused and asked. If you had not revealed ownership that night, would you have told me later? Yes. When? When you were ready to listen. She considered that carefully. Readiness is not about intelligence. It is about humility. And humility cannot be rushed. The story had not ended. It had evolved. Because power inside marriage is far more delicate than power inside corporations. And now we were entering the most fragile phase. Reconstruction. Reconstruction does not announce itself with celebration, it unfolds quietly through daily choices and subtle restraint, and in the weeks that followed the voiding of those divorce papers our home felt different, not because tension vanished but because awareness remained present in every conversation. She moved through the house with deliberate thoughtfulness, as if measuring her words more carefully than before, not out of fear but out of respect. Respect for silence. Respect for preparation. Respect for what she had almost dismissed. I did not shift into dominance or authority inside the marriage, because corporate power has no place in partnership, and using it there would have destroyed everything that had just been rebuilt. Instead, I did something she had not expected. I became more transparent than ever. I began inviting her into strategy conversations not as subordinate but as partner. Not revealing confidential board details. Not merging roles. But explaining frameworks. How acquisitions are evaluated. How risk is quantified. How timing is selected. She listened differently now. Not searching for weakness. Not searching for proof of ambition. Listening to understand structure. One evening she admitted something quietly. I confused visibility with value. That admission carried depth. Because her entire corporate ascent had rewarded visibility. Panel appearances. Internal recognition. Performance reviews. In her world those who spoke loudly advanced quickly. In mine those who calculated quietly gained control. We had lived inside two models of power. Neither wrong. But dangerously misunderstood. Meanwhile outside our home the company faced its first real public test under my ownership. A rival logistics conglomerate launched an aggressive expansion campaign into one of our newly secured corridors. Financial media speculated about conflict. Industry analysts questioned whether our acquisition would withstand competition. Board members began preparing defensive strategies. The pressure was external this time. Not personal. Yet how we responded would influence everything. She watched the headlines carefully. Are you worried? No. Why? Because reaction benefits the aggressor. That answer unsettled her slightly. In her career defensive strategy had often meant quick counteraction. Public statements. Rapid partnerships. Aggressive moves. I chose patience. I let the competitor overextend financially into infrastructure that had hidden compliance complications. We had identified those vulnerabilities months earlier during due diligence. They had not. Weeks passed and regulatory investigations halted their expansion abruptly. Markets corrected. Analysts shifted tone. Our stock stabilized without a single public confrontation. She observed the entire sequence carefully. You saw that coming. Yes. And you did nothing. Preparation is action. She absorbed that deeply. The concept that stillness could be strategic began reshaping her instincts. At work her leadership style softened slightly. Not weaker. More measured. She began asking more questions in meetings rather than dominating conversation. Her team responded with increased loyalty. Performance metrics improved quietly. Executives noticed. She did not tell them why. But she knew. Inside our home the emotional reconstruction deepened. One night she returned from work unsettled. An executive peer had implied that her promotion only occurred because of my ownership. The suggestion was subtle. But damaging. She stood in the kitchen visibly conflicted. This is what I feared. I listened carefully. Perception is harder to manage than performance. She feared becoming symbol rather than strategist. I reassured her calmly. Your performance predates ownership. Let data defend you. Not emotion. The next board review she presented a strategy outline so comprehensive and forward-thinking that even skeptical executives could not dispute her competence. I did not intervene. I did not speak. I allowed her authority to stand independently. After the meeting she looked at me with relief not because I had protected her but because I had trusted her. Trust builds slower than acquisition. But it lasts longer. Her family watched this evolution carefully. Her father visited one afternoon and asked directly how we were managing perception. I explained our governance separation transparently. He nodded approvingly. Then he asked something more personal. Did you ever consider exposing her publicly that night? No. Why? Because humiliation weakens structure. He absorbed that carefully. Perhaps understanding finally that restraint had preserved dignity. Her brother later approached me privately admitting he would not have shown such composure. He would have used revelation as leverage. I answered simply. Leverage breaks bridges. Structure builds them. The external competitor eventually requested partnership discussions after their failed expansion. I accepted. Not as conquest. As consolidation. When the agreement finalized, the market recognized our stability not as dominance but as inevitability. That word resurfaced again. Inevitable. The same quality she once misjudged. The same quality that had sat silently on our couch while divorce papers waited. One evening months after the banquet we returned to that living room intentionally. The sunlight filtered through the windows just as it had the day she handed me the pen. She stood where she once believed she was elevating beyond me. This time her posture was not superior. It was aligned. She asked quietly. If I had not handed you those papers, would we have ever confronted this? Maybe not. And that was the real revelation. The divorce papers had forced exposure. Exposure had forced humility. Humility had forced growth. The irony was that what she believed was departure had become catalyst. She stepped closer. I do not want to outrun you. You cannot. The sentence was not arrogant. It was factual. Not because of wealth. Because of discipline. She smiled softly, understanding the distinction. The next phase of our story was not about acquisition. It was about permanence. Because rebuilding trust is one stage. Sustaining it under new pressure is another. And pressure was coming again. Pressure does not always arrive with headlines, sometimes it arrives disguised as opportunity, and 3 months after the competitor's failed expansion, an internal audit revealed something that threatened not only her position but the structural integrity of the entire company. A regional procurement division had approved contracts that bypassed compliance review and the signatures traced upward through reporting lines, eventually touching her department. Not directly implicating her, but uncomfortably close. Financial journalists had not yet discovered it. Regulatory bodies had not yet intervened. But the board had. An emergency executive session was scheduled for Monday morning. Her face was calm when she told me, but her eyes revealed tension. If this goes wrong, it will look like favoritism if you intervene. I listened carefully. Because this was the true test. Public scrutiny would be immediate. Competitors would amplify it. Critics would frame it as nepotism. I answered clearly. I will not intervene in process. She nodded, understanding the significance. Process must remain intact. Monday morning the executive conference room felt heavier than any banquet hall. Directors sat aligned. Legal counsel prepared documentation. Compliance officers presented findings. The audit confirmed that a mid-level director under her strategic oversight had approved accelerated procurement without proper review, citing urgency for expansion. It was not fraud. It was negligence. Negligence that occurred under her division. All eyes moved toward her. This was not symbolic now. This was structural. She stood slowly and addressed the board without defensiveness. She accepted oversight responsibility. Not guilt. Responsibility. She outlined corrective measures. Immediate suspension of the involved director. Independent compliance review. Temporary pause on related contracts. Her tone was steady. Measured. Transparent. No one looked at me. And I did not speak. Because authority abused would have destroyed her credibility. When the board requested my position as chairman, I responded simply. Governance requires process. I support the board's independent review. No protection. No favoritism. Just structure. The meeting ended without decision. A formal review committee was appointed. Media silence remained intact for now. But tension inside our home intensified. She returned that evening exhausted, not physically but emotionally. This is what you meant about pressure. Yes. She paced slowly across the living room. If they remove me, it will look justified. If they keep me, it will look biased. Either way, perception will twist. I approached her calmly. Then focus on integrity. Perception adjusts to consistency. The following weeks tested her more than any promotion ever had. Interviews with compliance officers. External legal audits. Board reviews. She did not ask for my influence. She did not request protection. She worked. Quietly. Deliberately. Correcting structural weaknesses. Implementing new oversight mechanisms. Reassigning reporting channels. The media eventually caught wind of the audit. Headlines emerged cautiously. Questions about executive oversight. Speculation about internal power dynamics. Share prices fluctuated briefly. Competitors whispered aggressively. Her family called anxiously. Her father worried about reputational damage. Her brother feared corporate politics. But she remained steady. The discipline she once misjudged she now embodied. 3 weeks later the review committee delivered its findings. No personal misconduct. Oversight gap acknowledged. Corrective actions praised. Recommendation to retain her position. The board voted unanimously to support continuation. Not because of ownership. Because of performance under pressure. When the vote concluded, the CEO addressed the room. Leadership is measured by response to failure, not absence of it. Her composure during review had earned more respect than her promotion speech ever had. After the meeting she did not rush to celebrate. She returned home quietly and stood near the same window where she once questioned alignment. You did not protect me. No. Thank you. That gratitude held depth. Because protection would have weakened her authority. Allowing process strengthened it. The audit storm had mirrored the divorce storm. Exposure. Pressure. Public perception. But this time she did not react with pride. She responded with discipline. That difference marked growth. Later that night she admitted something profound. I used to think power meant standing above others. Now I see it means standing through pressure. Yes. The word felt complete. The media cycle shifted again, praising the company's transparent governance. Analysts noted resilience. Investors regained confidence. Her leadership credibility rose significantly. Not because she avoided scandal. Because she navigated it. The psychological hierarchy between us dissolved completely. Not because of wealth. Because of mutual discipline. She no longer viewed my silence as stagnation. I no longer underestimated her resilience. We had both been tested. Separately. Under scrutiny. And survived. One evening weeks later we revisited the banquet hall, not for celebration but for a strategic summit. As she stood beside me addressing senior leadership, her voice carried grounded authority. Not elevated. Aligned. After the summit she turned toward me softly. The divorce papers were the first storm. This was the second. And we are still standing. Yes. Because storms reveal foundation. And foundation built on humility does not collapse easily. The next phase would not test perception. It would test legacy. Because sustaining power across generations requires more than discipline. It requires vision. Legacy does not begin when wealth accumulates, it begins when decisions outlive ego. And several months after the audit storm passed and public perception stabilized, a quieter, more personal challenge surfaced from a place we believed had already healed. Her brother requested a private meeting. Not at the office. Not at their parents' home. At our house. The request itself carried weight. When he arrived his confidence looked different, not inflated, not defensive, but strained. He sat across from us in the same living room that had once held divorce papers and audit stress and corporate recalibration. His business, a renewable energy startup, had grown steadily but recently faced funding obstacles. Investors hesitated. Cash flow tightened. Expansion stalled. He spoke carefully, outlining projections and shortfalls. Then he paused. I need capital. The sentence hung in the air not as entitlement but expectation. Family history made the ask complicated. Before the banquet he had viewed me as stagnant. Before the audit he had doubted her judgment. Now he requested partnership. I did not respond immediately. Because family capital can fracture relationships faster than corporate risk. He continued explaining how a modest investment could secure long-term growth. How alignment with our infrastructure network could accelerate distribution. How synergy made sense strategically. The proposal was not reckless. But it was personal. She looked at me searching not for permission but for perspective. I asked calmly. If we decline, how does that affect our relationship? He answered honestly. It would hurt. Honesty mattered. Then I asked. If we invest and it fails, how does that affect our relationship? He hesitated. That would hurt more. Silence followed. Because the real negotiation was not financial. It was relational. She spoke gently. You used to measure him by visibility. Now measure him by discipline. Her words surprised me slightly. She had shifted fully. Her brother nodded, acknowledging the reference. He admitted that in earlier years he would have leveraged family pride to secure capital. Now he understood structure. I explained clearly. We do not fund family out of sentiment. We fund structure. If your governance holds. If your compliance holds. If your projections withstand scrutiny. Then we invest. He agreed to independent review. No shortcuts. No preferential terms. Over the next month our finance division audited his company thoroughly. Market assumptions. Supply chain stability. Regulatory exposure. The results showed potential but revealed significant risk concentration in one international corridor. He had expanded aggressively. Too aggressively. I invited him back for final discussion. Your growth is impressive. But your risk profile is unstable. He listened quietly. Reduce exposure. Strengthen compliance. Secure diversified contracts. Then return. He did not argue. He did not accuse. He accepted. Because discipline now governed expectation. Her father later visited again, curious about the outcome. He asked whether we supported the venture. Not yet. The response unsettled him slightly. Family must support family. Family must protect family. Protection without structure weakens both. He reflected carefully. Perhaps remembering his earlier assumption about ambition. Weeks passed and her brother restructured operations precisely as advised. Closed volatile contracts. Renegotiated supply lines. Secured new domestic agreements. When he returned this time the numbers aligned. Risk adjusted. Governance improved. Growth sustainable. We invested. Not because of blood. Because of discipline. The partnership agreement included standard performance clauses. No favoritism. Transparency documented. He signed without hesitation. That act restored something deeper than capital. Trust. She watched the entire process carefully. You did not reject him. You refined him. Growth requires friction. Without friction, expansion collapses. Months later his company stabilized successfully. Media outlets covered the strategic alliance between our logistics network and his renewable infrastructure. Public narrative framed it as family synergy. They never saw the scrutiny behind it. Which was fine. Because true alignment does not require applause. One evening after the partnership finalized, she sat beside me reflecting. If this had happened a year ago, I would have pressured you to invest immediately. I know. She smiled faintly. Now I understand why you would not have. Humility had matured into wisdom. But legacy planning extends beyond siblings. It extends into generations. We began discussing succession formally. Not because age demanded it. Because structure required it. We drafted governance charters. Defined ownership pathways. Established independent oversight. No child of ours would inherit control without qualification. No relative would receive authority without capability. Merit would anchor legacy. Not surname. Her family initially reacted cautiously to the rigid governance plan. Her father asked whether blood should guarantee stake. Blood guarantees relationship. Not competence. He nodded slowly. Understanding had replaced ego. The storm of divorce. The storm of audit. The storm of family investment. Each had layered discipline deeper. One quiet night as we reviewed the succession charter, she looked at me thoughtfully. I almost lost this because I mistook quiet for weakness. And I almost lost it because I mistook explanation for necessity. Both of us had grown. The driveway outside our house felt symbolic again, not because of humiliation but because it represented foundation. The company thrived. Her leadership matured. Her brother stabilized. Her parents respected boundaries. But legacy would soon face one final test. Not financial. Not reputational. Personal. Because trust once fractured can reappear unexpectedly under pressure. The rumor did not arrive with confrontation, it arrived quietly through digital whispers and anonymous posts that began circulating across executive forums suggesting that her rapid rise inside the company was never independent but strategically orchestrated by ownership long before the public announcement. The accusation was subtle yet dangerous. It implied deception. It implied manipulation. It implied that the promotion speech had been staged. Competitors amplified the suggestion carefully. Financial blogs dissected timelines. Corporate analysts questioned internal transparency. Within days the narrative spread beyond industry circles. Her inbox filled with coded questions. Board members requested clarifications. Employees exchanged private messages. The rumor did not attack our marriage directly. It attacked credibility. And credibility once doubted can fracture legacy. She read the headlines calmly but her hands tightened slightly around her phone. This is different. Yes. Because this storm targeted integrity. She sat across from me absorbing the magnitude. If they believe I knew before the banquet everything changes. I answered steadily. Then prove consistency. Not through denial. Through documentation. We activated internal transparency protocols immediately. Released archived email timestamps. Board approval sequences. Governance logs. Every record demonstrated that her promotion decision preceded the acquisition completion. The overlap was coincidence, not coordination. But coincidence rarely satisfies rumor. The board convened again, not in emergency but in caution. Directors questioned perception impact. Investor confidence. Regulatory interpretation. Public trust. I spoke briefly. Integrity does not defend itself emotionally, it defends itself structurally. The documentation stood unchallenged. Yet perception lingered. She faced the greater challenge. An all-employee town hall was scheduled. Thousands would watch live. Some supportive. Some skeptical. She prepared alone that night. Not rehearsing applause lines. Preparing truth. The following morning she stood on stage without defensive posture. She addressed the rumor directly. She explained timeline. She explained governance separation. She explained her oversight responsibilities. Her voice did not waver. She did not mention marriage. She did not invoke ownership. She spoke only about integrity. And then she said something that shifted the room. If my position were ever secured through favoritism, I would step down immediately. The sentence landed firmly. Because no one expecting protection offers resignation. Silence filled the auditorium. Then gradual applause. Not loud. Not explosive. Steady. Because authenticity resonates slowly. After the town hall, investor sentiment stabilized. Media interest shifted. Competitors retreated. But one final layer remained. Her parents called that evening, worried again about public scrutiny. Her father asked whether the stress was worth it. She answered without hesitation. Yes. Because alignment built through storms does not collapse through whispers. That answer revealed full transformation. Later that night she turned toward me quietly. Did you expect this? Yes. Why? Because power invites narrative. The stronger the foundation, the louder the speculation. She nodded. I used to fear public judgment. Now I fear internal weakness. Internal weakness is the only real threat. The rumor gradually dissolved as transparency sustained itself. Quarterly performance exceeded projections. Governance audits passed cleanly. Shareholders reaffirmed confidence. Her leadership reputation strengthened paradoxically. Not because rumor disappeared. Because she faced it. But inside our marriage the deeper test was simpler. Trust. Rumors test ego. Silence tests alignment. One evening she admitted something unexpected. When the rumor began, part of me wondered whether you would regret not protecting me publicly at the banquet. I looked at her steadily. Do you still wonder? No. Because if you had protected me then this rumor would have destroyed me now. She understood fully. Protection without merit breeds dependency. Merit without protection builds authority. The storms had layered maturity. From divorce to audit to family investment to public rumor. Each tested different aspects of structure. And each strengthened foundation. But legacy planning still awaited final confirmation. Because generational succession requires clarity not only about power but about partnership. Legacy does not ask who is strongest, it asks who is steady when strength is no longer required, and the conversation that followed the rumor storm was not sparked by crisis but by clarity, because once credibility had been tested publicly and survived, the question shifted from survival to permanence. We were no longer reacting to storms. We were designing continuity. One evening after a long strategy session with the board, we remained inside the executive conference room long after everyone else had left, and the skyline outside the glass walls shimmered against the night as if the city itself was waiting for the next chapter. She closed her laptop slowly and looked at me with an expression that carried both confidence and contemplation. If something happened to you tomorrow, what would happen to this company? The question was not dramatic. It was disciplined. Succession had been drafted. Governance outlined. Contingency protocols structured. But there is a difference between documentation and acceptance. I answered calmly. Control would transfer to the trust structure immediately. Independent directors would assume interim authority. Operational continuity would remain intact. And you? I paused. Ownership would not automatically grant you control. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, not in offense but in curiosity. Why? Because legacy must protect the company from emotional transfer. Even ours. Silence settled between us. She understood the implication. Marriage does not equal succession. Competence equals succession. She leaned back in her chair, thinking deeply. If something happened to me tomorrow, what would you do? I would follow the charter. No immediate replacement. No symbolic appointment. The board would appoint the strongest candidate available. Even if that candidate were not family. She nodded slowly, absorbing the weight. The discipline we had built inside our marriage now extended beyond us. It extended beyond blood. It extended into principle. Weeks later we invited her parents to join a private discussion about the finalized succession framework. Her father read through the documents carefully. Her mother listened quietly. Her brother observed with new maturity. When her father realized that no direct family line guaranteed automatic control, his expression shifted slightly. You are serious about this? Yes. Blood builds legacy. But merit sustains it. He reflected on that longer than expected. Years earlier he might have resisted. Now he understood. Perhaps because he had witnessed storms. Her brother surprised us by supporting the structure immediately. If my company survives, it will be because of discipline, not because of you. That acknowledgement marked growth. We formalized the succession trust publicly shortly after. Financial markets reacted positively. Analysts praised the governance clarity. Investors appreciated the insulation from personal risk. But privately something else occurred. Freedom. Because once control is no longer tied to ego, it becomes lighter. One evening months later she approached me quietly in the driveway, the same driveway where divorce papers once symbolized fracture. You know something. Tell me. If you had fought me that day in the living room, I would have defended my pride until everything collapsed. And if you had exposed me publicly at the banquet, I would have resented you forever. Instead you stayed steady. Steadiness outlasts pride. She smiled softly. Then let us stay steady. The next challenge did not come from business. It came from health. A routine medical exam revealed a minor but urgent condition requiring immediate surgical intervention. Not life-threatening, but serious enough to pause executive duties temporarily. The announcement to the board was structured calmly. Temporary leave. Delegated authority. Interim oversight. The succession framework was tested not in theory but in practice. She stepped back gracefully, allowing the governance system to function without interference. I observed carefully. No power struggle. No insecurity. No panic. The structure worked. Board committees operated independently. Operational leadership remained stable. Market confidence held. She recovered fully within weeks. But the lesson was profound. Legacy had survived absence. Which meant it was real. After returning to the office, she admitted something quietly. Stepping away did not feel like losing control. It felt like trusting design. That sentence marked the true completion of reconstruction. Because trust in design means ego has dissolved. The storms had taught us that silence without structure fractures relationships. But structure without humility fractures legacy. Now both were aligned. The final chapter would not revolve around scandal or rivalry. It would revolve around choice. Because ultimate power is not revealed by acquisition or defense. It is revealed by the willingness to release. The final decision did not arrive during crisis nor during applause, but during a quiet Sunday afternoon when sunlight filtered through the same living room windows that once witnessed divorce papers resting on polished wood and ambition colliding with silence. We were not discussing stock performance. Not negotiating acquisitions. Not defending rumors. We were discussing time. Time has a different weight once legacy is structured. Because when succession is defined and governance is independent and wealth is insulated from ego, the only remaining question is purpose. She sat across from me holding a folder that did not contain contracts but philanthropic projections. Education infrastructure. Community logistics corridors. Healthcare supply networks. All initiatives external to profit. I watched her expression carefully. It no longer carried competition. It no longer carried insecurity. It carried clarity. We built something strong, she said softly. Yes. But strength can either expand inward or outward. She slid the folder toward me. I opened it slowly. Inside were proposals for a permanent foundation funded by a significant portion of ownership dividends. Not symbolic charity. Structural reinvestment. If we step back from active executive roles within the next 5 years, she continued, we can focus on long-term societal architecture. Her words carried maturity that did not exist when she first handed me those divorce papers. That day she believed elevation meant separation. Now she believed elevation meant contribution. I studied the numbers carefully. The allocation was bold. Aggressive. Generational. This would not reduce our lifestyle. It would redefine our identity. You are ready to release daily control? I asked quietly. Yes. Because control is no longer proof of value. The sentence landed with weight. Years earlier she would have fought to maintain executive spotlight. Now she was willing to transition deliberately. We convened the board 2 weeks later. Presented a 5-year phase transition plan. Gradual reduction in active oversight. Expansion of independent leadership. Foundation charter activation. The directors were surprised but supportive. Markets reacted with curiosity, not panic. Because governance was already insulated. Our absence would not destabilize structure. Her parents responded with mixed emotion. Her father worried about stepping away from influence. She answered calmly. Influence is not defined by title. Her brother applauded the decision, recognizing long-term vision. The transition period unfolded gradually. She mentored 2 successors intensively. Not grooming loyalty. Grooming competence. I strengthened independent oversight committees. Ensuring no vacuum formed. Over those years our public presence shifted from executive authority to institutional guidance. We became architects rather than operators. One evening near the end of that 5-year window we stood again in the driveway where everything once fractured. The house was quiet. The company stable. The foundation preparing to launch its largest educational corridor initiative. She looked at the sky thoughtfully. Do you remember the day I handed you those papers? Yes. I thought I was stepping forward. You were. Just not in the direction you imagined. She smiled softly. Silence followed, not awkward but full. Because reflection no longer carried regret. It carried gratitude. The final board meeting where we formally relinquished daily executive roles was not dramatic. No farewell speeches. No emotional displays. Just signatures transferring operational authority fully to structured leadership. When the documents were completed I felt something unexpected. Lightness. Power that is held too tightly becomes weight. Power released through design becomes legacy. We left the tower that evening without entourage. No spotlight. No announcement. Just 2 people who once nearly separated because of perception now walking aligned because of discipline. Months later the foundation launched publicly. Education grants across underserved regions. Healthcare logistics infrastructure. Entrepreneurship incubators. The media praised the scale. But what mattered was permanence. We no longer measured success by acquisition. We measured it by impact. One quiet night years after the banquet and the audit and the rumor and the succession planning she turned toward me with the same calm expression she wore when she voided the divorce papers. You never fought me. Because fighting pride only strengthens it. You never humiliated me. Because humiliation fractures trust. You never protected me when I needed to stand alone. Because standing alone built strength. She paused gently. You were never behind me. You were building beneath me. Foundation. The word carried everything. The storms were necessary. The divorce papers were necessary. The rumor was necessary. Even the audit was necessary. Because each revealed weakness and refined discipline. We never again measured each other by visibility. We measured by steadiness. The company continued thriving under independent leadership. The foundation expanded across continents. Her brother's enterprise matured responsibly. Her parents aged with pride, not in wealth but in wisdom. And our marriage evolved beyond competition. Beyond hierarchy. Into partnership defined by clarity. The day she handed me those papers she believed she was leaving a man who had stopped growing. In truth she was confronting a structure she had not yet understood. And the day we stepped away from executive control we both realized that growth was never about title. It was about alignment. Now when we sit in that living room, sunlight still filtering through the windows, there are no papers on the table. No pride. No perception. Only permanence. Because the greatest revelation was never the $10 billion company. It was this. Power does not prove love. Discipline sustains it. And when discipline and humility align, storms become foundation rather than fracture. That is where the story truly ends. Not with acquisition. Not with divorce. Not with promotion. But with design. Steady. Aligned. Permanent.